The start of another day in our week-long marathon of semi-brev supporter entries for the 2022 Orchestration Challenge. With this great score by Dragan, which I felt has so many wonderful aspects to it, solving a lot of problems that we've seen in some other scores while creating others. But we will fix it all and look through all of the different things that you could possibly do to make this a little bit more cohesive, more playable, more ready to be put on the musician's stands at an orchestral rehearsal. Okay, Dragan? So, starting off from the beginning, I felt that this was a beautiful way to start. Just the first three notes of the melody rather than the harmonized bar that we saw in the original piano score. And then you've got a little bit of imitation here in your oboes. Very nice. So if you're going to be slurring across, and especially across these two notes, why aren't the oboes slurred as well? Now, having said that, I would actually prefer that you didn't have this big long slur, because that is just imitating what's in the piano part. There's really no need for this to be slurred all the way across. You could just slur the first bar, da, 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 right? And then the tonguing on this downbeat would go along with the bowing in the strings, right? And then here, as you might have read, or you might have watched in some of my other evaluations, you've got a slur across repeated notes. So what does that mean? Right? Now, I really want you to think about this. Now, there is some use of a slur across woodwinds in repeated notes, but generally speaking, it implies a portato. And if it implies a portato, in other words, to add emphasis to the attack of each note with the stomach rather than the tongue, then why not just write that? Do you know what I mean? Why not just have a slurred tenuto notes? Ta, ta, right? I mean, it just, you just have to show a little bit more application in this. I just feel it's not, it is not enough to just slur a bunch of repeated notes. I mean, yes, it does occur here and there, but I want you to avoid that, because you are leaving everything up to the woodwind player, and each of these players might have a different idea of what you mean. Like the first oboist might say, oh, well, what he means here is like a nice legato, repeated notes, and he's just, borrowing some phrasing from a piano part, and that's all cool. So they'll tongue these legato. And then the flute player will think, oh, well, what he wants here is a portato. So they'll play that portato, and then you end up with two different articulation styles. Do you see the problem here, everybody? Everybody out there out there watching this, with just putting a slur across repeated notes. It's like you are losing control of how you intend that to be played. All right? Or you just end up with having one person decide, like the conductor say, can that just be, can everybody just play these legato, please? Legato articulation under these slurs, and then move on. But you're just wasting rehearsal time as well, right? So the perfectionist in me says, please stop doing this, right? Because this is one of those mistakes that I said, 12 common errors, just using piano phrasing as slurring for bowing and winds. But here, you are not using, here you are doing very usable bowing patterns in your slurring and ties. That's great. See, so why couldn't this be applied to your solo instruments? And furthermore, how come there is no slurring of any kind in your clarinets, right? Why couldn't we have just gotten rid of this slur and put slurs at the end of the bars, right? Ta ta da da ta ta, right? And the same thing happening here. Ta. And then this could all be slurred. Da, da, right? Okay. And then the same thing here, right? We have another slur over repeated notes. Now, having said all this, gotten after you about it, it's just I'm seeing it a lot, so it's starting to get to me, okay? The scoring is really, really nice. Okay, I mean, I love the idea of this beautiful warm harmony coming from below in the strings, kind of behind your winds. See, so this is an example of where, excuse me, of where I would excuse the idea of of different volume levels for winds and strings, because obviously this is just intended to be like a sort of a background kind of a feeling to the accompaniment. So you really don't want the strings to dominate what's going on or to blend with what's going on. You want them to really be a background pad. So that's all good. However, when you get to this point right in here and you're bringing in the horns, you absolutely have to mark some dynamic that is stronger than pianissimo. Okay? And you can even hear that in the mock-up. Your mock-up is telling you that these, that these little descending harmonies here in your violins are not necessarily going to be strong enough to carry what's going on, to be a part of what's happening here. Now here is an example of just a few really small notes, little interjections from your horns. And as I've told others, here is where I think that the first and second should work together, because it's very soft and it's very delicate. Now this is wrong. Here you've got one marked for both parts, right? So this should be first horn, and if you absolutely insist on keeping this part in this staff, this would have to be horn 3 or horn 4, right? Probably horn 3. However, I would submit to you that both parts should be on the same staff, and it should be horns 1 and 2, and you shouldn't do this voice crossing here of your first horn going up a fourth and your second horn going down a second. So I think that that distinction. I mean, I see what you're doing here. You kind of want this. You want this leap to be, this raise of a fourth to be a voice. But when you are adding this harmonization, then it just all goes away. So just write everything out, with the first part on top playing the F sharp going to the G, the second part on the bottom with the D going to the E, and so on. Okay, I mean, I love the contrary motion and everything else that implies. So just make this into horns 1 and 2 and have them on the same staff, and don't do this voice crossing. All right. Now here you're going to A2. You don't need to do that. This can just still be first and second, and then then add the third and fourth horn. All right, and in this case, you want to split things up so that as these parts rise, see, this is fine. Horn 1, 2, and 3 sharing the same horn 1 at the top G, horn 2 and 3 sharing the E, and horn 4 playing the C sharp below. All right, so sorry, I'm starting to talk in concert pitch. And then here, this should be first horn on top, and then second horn playing the F sharp. This B should be played by the third horn here. Do you see what I mean? It should interweave, right? Because there's absolutely no reason for this to be scored out 1-3 on top, 2-4 on the bottom. Nobody needs that, right? There's no necessity for that. There isn't, if you have pages and pages of first horn and third horn playing very high, very loud melodies together, then yeah, sure, have 1 and 3 on the same staff. But you don't need 1 and 3 on the same staff. This is a very standard kind of concert scoring. Okay, so these should interweave. So like right here, you interlock. I shouldn't say interweave. Here, your parts are interlocking. This is absolutely perfect. So why wasn't this approach used in this bar, right? Maybe you didn't get a chance to prove it. Okay, now here we have a further problem, and I think that this has got to be put into my next collection of 12 more common scoring errors, and that is, where's the destination? You are all on this road together now. Horns, upper winds, strings. You are all pushing towards what? Well, the bassoonist knows. He knows that this is a mezzo forte, but what about everybody else? They don't know. They don't know that the bassoonist has gotten a mezzo forte. So they may just think they're going up to mezzo piano, or just a little bit above, just an inflected, warmer piano. By the way, this is assuming that you have taken my advice and changed this to a piano dynamic, right? So it doesn't get buried by the horns. All right, so let's assume. So this is piano, this is pianissimo, the horns come in, the strings go to piano, the violins, I should say, go to piano. Everybody comes in on a piano here in the middle strings. We're all pushing towards something. And let's say that they just push a little bit, and they just get, sort of piano plus, right? Not really mezzo piano, but just a slightly warmer piano. Piano is a really, really big, it is a cavernous world, right? Mezzo piano is just a very small slice on one side, and pianissimo is a small slice on the other. But piano, the sense of piano is its own universe of inflection and nuance, right? So these players just think that they're still playing piano, right? And here comes the bassoonist, mezzo forte. Bum, ba, da, da. Do you see what I'm saying? Here's the problem. You have not told everybody else where they're going, right? So you have to tell us all in the orchestra that you're going to a mezzo forte. Okay, now other than that, it's really nicely scored. So I really love the horns and the working once again in contrary motion. I mean, you've got some beautiful ideas here. You've got imitation. You've got contrary motion. You really are bringing up the level from the very simple beginning for this prelude, which is a prelude. It's not a complex piece of music. It is really intended to be, like the prelude, right? What is a prelude? Maybe the first piece that you play when you sit down to practice, or the first piece in a concert, or just an introductory piece that you play before something else. So yeah, or just its own kind of piece that has a sort of a lighter feeling to it, but can still get really complex, as we see it later on in this piece. Okay, so one last little problem here is that you have this beautiful slurring, right? But you've left it off of your clarinets, and then when you get to here, there's no slurring, so it's all ta, 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 ta. Is that really what you want here? Shouldn't it be ta, 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 ta? Sorry, right? I think that, with respect, I think that you need to manage that, and I think you need to manage the dynamics. Better to use hairpins and then everybody to end on a piano or a pianissimo again, okay? So you really need to tell people where they're going. Here I would actually on this rest, I would put a pianissimo, right? So just because you really want the horns to fade out as the other more interesting parts are being played around it. All right, so that is my look at your first very strong beginning. I just really, really love this, despite the fact that I'm kind of tearing it to bits on inflections and slurring and tonguing and everything else. It's still very strong. And here, like one last little thing is, I would make everybody match in their slurring, right? Right. So go ta 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 ta, right? And then here we go. Da, da, right? And then same thing here. Just slur up, slur down. And then you have a beautiful, cohesive, coherent sound where the whole orchestra is working together and going towards a mezzo forte, which you should score in every part. And then instead of this diminuendo, have a hairpin, as I said before, and then tell us where the hairpin is going. It's not enough to say diminuendo. What does that mean? Diminuendo with no destination. That means every player is going to decide for themselves, and just by listening to each other, how soft they should get. And maybe it won't be soft enough for you. What are you going to do then? You'll be sitting there in the concert, and everybody goes down to a mezzo piano, and you just think, that just didn't really go anywhere. Well, that's your fault, because you didn't tell us to go down to piano, right? So don't leave it up to the player. Write in what it means, and use hairpins instead of just these words. Mezzo forte, diminuendo, and hairpins tell us where we're going. Okay? All right. Next page. Okay, so here we have to discuss proportions, right? And you have already used this, right? You've already used first flute solo. So now we're just playing first flute solo again, so there's no sense of innovation, right? It's as if the melody doesn't want to go anywhere, right? So have you considered using a different instrument here, like maybe oboe, right? Just think of the color difference here. If oboe were taking this top line and you have this beautiful sort of chattering reeds below it, all right? I think that would be really powerful. But the problem is this, okay? So here we're getting into some science, Dragan. And that is that the strings, just such as you have scored them, even at pianissimo, are absorptive of the flute sound, right? So you have these strings kind of working away under the flute, and you have your flute marked up 1 dynamic degree and everything else. But since you don't have any nuances pushing at the flutes, you don't really have much of a dynamic curve or anything going on with this piano espressivo even would be enough. But I'll tell you, just listening to it in my head and listening to the mock-up too, which is also very revealing, the strings are absorbing the sound of the flutes, and so are your mezzo forte lower winds in here, right? You're pushing them to be so loud in here that they will also absorb the sound of the flute. So why not just ditch the flute and put an oboe in here, right? And then this could be played, it could be all oboes. This could be first oboe all the way through, and then this could be second oboe answering below, right? Okay, so that is part of the problem. It is not just the fact that you've already used flute, and so there's nothing new about this, right? So that's proportions, right? What are the proportions? Which kind of scoring follows the other kind? So I'm not taking anything away from the way you scored things on the whole here, right? So like it it is more or less working well, except I disagree with the dynamics, which is something we'll talk about in a second. But I just feel that just reusing flute doesn't really say enough, right? So anyway, so try oboe. Seriously, just, take your mock-up and throw in the oboe there and then contrast it. Like, you really have to listen to these sections one after the other, right? The first section said one thing, and then the second section says another thing, and if you put them back to back and they say the same thing too much, then it's sort of like the piece isn't going anywhere, right? And one of my concerns was that there would be a progression of emotional meaning, right? The emotions have to say something new each time. All right. So or they have to go somewhere. They have to tell a story. Okay. So now let's so let's talk about the scoring now and what I disagree with. Okay. So once again, see, here's another problem: is that this is the same role that the strings played before, right? They were kind of a warm cushion in the background and so on and so forth. However, you cannot keep doing this because this scoring here is a part of the melody, right? So it cannot be a background cushion. So it has to be the same dynamic as the melody instrument above, right? Because it is the melody, right? So here you have, even, and as I was just saying, this will absorb the sound. This kind of warm strings below will tend to absorb the sound of the flute. That doesn't mean the flute will disappear, as happens in some scoring, but it will still rob the flute of some of its shine. And that, what do? You add an oboe part instead, because the oboe doesn't have that problem because of the way, its resonance. Anyway, so it's actually pretty nice scoring. Just adjust, change this solo instrument and adjust this dynamic so they're all playing piano together. Now here, there's absolutely no reason for these parts in the middle to be mezzo forte, right? It would be better to go just piano in your contrabassoon part, and then piano here, and then crescendo, right? So piano crescendo. And you don't have to write mezzo forte, crescendo to mezzo forte or anything. Just have a little bit of crescendo in here. Same thing here with the clarinet, so that there's a sense of bringing the line out, and then a little bit of diminuendo towards the end, right? And then you can continue to do that in this, and you get a better emotional arc from it. Now, I'm not so sure that I agree with this, with these unslurred notes. See, here I'm trying to get you to slur more rather than slur less. So wherever you throw this in, you sort of interrupt the flow. Like this, there's this kind of sense of flowing across, right? Like in just the same way that you have the pedaled left hand in the piano part. So I would say don't have individually articulated notes as part of that. Just try to have everything maybe slurring in groups, in beam groups, ta 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 ta. You know what I mean? Rather than ta 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 ta. Right? So the ta 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 really interrupts that kind of smoothness. On the other hand, I think that your slurring needs to be a little disciplined here. I mean, actually, I like the whole idea of really, really beautifully smooth long bows here, and that's okay. I mean, it's acceptable. I would say if you're trying to make this very, very smooth throughout, that's fine, except here it's just ridiculous, right? I mean, it's, here the violin players, all the string players are playing across, 1 3/4 bars, and then in the last quarter of a bar they slur up, right? So it's down, up, down, and then here you're going to say up, down. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just really, and then you take away, like by slurring this da, there's really, the player has there's no firm down bow stroke on the downbeat. Right? So I think that you should rethink the slurs here. So just don't slur this across the downbeat, right? Just go da da, right? And then ta 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 ta, right? Okay. Just do what the clarinets are doing, right? You've got them slurred right, and then this should also be the tonguing here should be the same as the bowing in the strings, and just avoid that here as well, going across the downbeat. Right? See, this is the problem. This all goes back to that problem of slurring, of using the piano phrasing, right? All right, so people have really got to watch the 12 Common Errors video, all right? Because we immediately ran into this problem here, right? Okay. Okay, but so far as like the overall idea of the scoring is concerned, it's all working pretty well. You're keeping, just get rid of this mezzo forte thing, right? So piano, just have it stay piano, and then poco a poco crescendo, that's fine, but where poco a poco crescendo to mezzo forte in some instruments, but not all instruments, what's going on? Where's the destination dynamic? Where are we going? Where are we headed? Once again, it's the same problem as the previous page. You have to tell us, where do we go? All right? And then also, it's kind of strange to poco a poco crescendo and continue going with that, even though you've reached kind of the top of the phrase here. Right? Right, so you would think, da, 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 da. You would think that this would be the peak of the phrase, right, of dynamically. It's not just it's kind of an obvious thing. The high note, the highest note in the phrase becomes the loudest note. Sorry, I've got a cat on my lap. So, yeah. Yeah, so just, please just really be precise about your dynamics. And if the horns are going to crescendo to here, and this is going to be like their loudest place right in here, shouldn't this be the loudest place for everybody? Poco a poco crescendo, give us the loudest dynamic right here on the downbeat for everyone, right? All the parts. And then you can just leave out the mezzo forte marking here. And then diminuendo with everybody, right? And then here, of course, you're picking up steam, right? And so I will just leave it to your imagination, how to like bring those two together. You want this to kind of have this big surge. So did you kind of notice how you have the pianissimo here, and then of course Sibelius paid absolutely zero attention to your poco a poco crescendo, even though you've got this long hairpin in here, right? So the thing about this long hairpin is Sibelius will just interpret pianissimo and this crescendo marking right in here as going up to piano, right? So right in here, your strings are piano, and that's why everything sounds so out of balance in the mock-up. So unless you were to get in and edit this hairpin to be very very strong by the time you got to here, but look, you can solve that entire problem by just putting the dynamic right here or right here, right? And then Sibelius will say, oh yeah, right, okay, so this crescendo hairpin, hidden or not, will get us louder, right? All right, so just think about how the dynamics are going to be managed in here. It's a small thing. So yeah, and like some of these don't even have a hidden slur, or sorry, a hidden hairpin. Okay, so I mean the only other possible critique that I would have is that like some of the strategies on this page could change. I could, the roles, for instance, of these, of who is playing this could change, right? You could trade off with the lower strings and the lower winds changing roles in some of these lower parts, right? And just give it a sense of, just sort of refresh the idea a little bit. But, right in here you are kind of bringing out the scoring and everything else. About the only critique is just like a perennial one is like, why are we, is everybody always scoring second flute in a place where it can't be heard in these octaves, right? So that is a strategy everybody is using. And once again, I'm going to keep saying this until people start listening. You cannot score a second flute so low and have it be heard, especially if you have, you have horns playing like this, a soft horn on this A. It will completely obliterate the flute. I don't care if the flute is marked mezzo piano or mezzo forte; it's gone, right? So really, please, everybody, please stop scoring flute in its lowest octave in a bigger complex texture like this. It will disappear. Would be so much better to go to A2 flutes here and just get a little bit of extra strength, doubling the strings, and especially since those pitches get covered by so many other, by oboe, and then like here you've got second oboe, and you've got horn and so on. So like, just really, there's no reason for the second flute to be playing this lower line. All right, okay. All right, so last page. So similar concerns as before, but yeah. So in terms of just like so many different dynamic markings, right? So forte in your strings and winds, mezzo forte in your horns, fortissimo in your trombones and trumpets. Okay, so this will stand out like nobody, like what is really going on here, right? What is the main idea of what's happening is really in the upper strings, right? And in the horns and so on, right? And that's all good. Okay, but this will stand out so loudly. This will be so incredibly loud. Now, maybe in the mock-up, you were sort of giving these dynamics so that the mock-up would sound right, but the mock-up is not telling you the right story here. I mean, I love the idea of what you're doing here, but you just need to manage the dynamics. It's enough to just mark these parts forte, right? Or even mezzo forte. You'd be surprised at how loud they were. Now here you have a very strange thing where it's still fortissimo and suddenly it's soft, right? Because you're starting your violin solo, and this will sound very, very awkward, Da da da. I mean, it just, it's going to be, and it's also going to be strange to go da da da, and then suddenly the violin solo. Right? See, so like you're kind of pushing everybody's ears open with the trumpet here, and then suddenly you're going to an incredibly delicate instrument on this same A, and it just won't be heard. Even the echo, the reverb in the concert hall of this high A will wash out the impact of this violin solo. So have you considered possibly inverting this, right? So that they're all 6/4 chords, right? So with the A on the bottom and playing it softer, right? So what if this were mezzo forte, this were mezzo forte or forte, and then this were mezzo piano diminuendo, right? And then this came in on this A, then it would be much more impactful. All right, and also forte, and this is continuing on forte, so it's also distracting from the sudden, everything is softening here, right? So shouldn't this also soften down to piano or even pianissimo, just to really get under this beautiful entrance of this violin solo? So all right, so this can tie to a quarter note rather than 2/8 in a row. It's just very, I mean, I understand what you're doing here. You want a fermata on the 8th note, or excuse me, the 16th note, and then a fermata on the next 16th note. So like I would say that you probably don't need to do this. You probably could just have a fermata on a dotted quarter note tied to another dotted quarter note, right? And then same thing here, fermata on an 8th note. So really what it is that you're trying to get this fermata here and then a fermata on the harp, right? So, but that's not needed. Right? Maybe it's needed in order to make the mock-up playback, but in a concert situation, don't worry about that. The conductor gets it. They will definitely give the harpist the space to get their little chord playing right in there, and then give the nod to the cello solo. All right. So I feel that so this is a great idea. diminuendo, I would say diminuendo possibly a little bit later rather than right away to pianissimo. And then the cello comes up from under. All right, and then you have the same thing happening again. So instead of these parts just trading off, they should dovetail, right? So I would say have your violin solo dovetail on this G here, and then the same thing here. Have the violin solo dovetail on this C, right? So it'll just sound like the cello has turned into a soaring violin solo. And it's a wonderful way to mess with the audience's ear, thinking, wow, there's an instrument that can go that high. I just never realized, right? Like, if they don't know anything about it, right? Okay. One little comment here. This is a harp roll, like the arrow roll line is completely unnecessary. You should only use it when you have alternating up and down rolls, right? Otherwise, do not use this at all. Just use the default, right? So this is what I mean. Here, let me open this up. All right, so instead of this, use this, right? Here, let's justify that a little so it's a little bit more visible. Okay, yeah, see, so all you need is just a plain roll line. Whenever you give a harpist or, say, a contemporary concert pianist or somebody else who deals with roll lines, whenever you give them an up arrow roll line, they will immediately look for where is the down arrow roll line. And they will not see one, and they will get annoyed at you. Because there's absolutely no need for this. This, when you write this, you mean this, so just use this, right? Okay. Okay, so so this is all fine. I like this forte piano crescendo, diminuendo, and to what? So you're saying forte piano crescendo, diminuendo, and then suddenly you're mezzo forte? Do you mean forte piano crescendo to forte, and then you're mezzo forte? So he's like, what do you mean here, right? So if you really mean for this to crescendo more than just a little inflection of strength, you're going to have to mark it, right? So like usually I tell people, don't put a dynamic in the middle if it's really obvious what you want. But it isn't really obvious because here you're going forte on the solo part, and here you're going crescendo, diminuendo, and then one of your parts says mezzo forte on it. So what does this mean? What is the dynamic here, right? Do you mean it to be mezzo forte along with the cello and so on? And then here, you have this really loud, and suddenly it's soft, and it gets completely buried by the resonance of the cello. And if this is meant to diminuendo to a mezzo forte, like everybody, or like not everybody else, like your lower strings, if this is all meant to diminuendo to a mezzo forte, then that will also bury this beautiful line right in here. So why not this? Okay. So forte piano, crescendo, diminuendo, forte piano, crescendo, diminuendo to P, right? And have them all be piano dynamic. And then for this crescendo, see, because there's so many subitos in this, right? That maybe you don't intend, right? Forte piano, crescendo, and so on. So do you mean this to go down to soft and then suddenly be loud here? Right? Do you mean this to be mezzo forte and then suddenly soft here? And then you have to write piano subito, right? So there's just you really have got to work out the dynamics in this a little bit more clearly, all right? And get rid of these up arrow rolls, all right, everybody? Stop putting in up arrow rolls when you just mean this, right? It's just, this is a specialized thing. It means that there is also, I'm telling you that this goes up because I told you to go down, or I'm going to be telling you to roll the other direction. Right? So just absolutely do not need it. Just forget about it, okay? Yeah. All right. So So, but other than me being picky about everything, it's really, I mean, the idea is the general idea, the general concept of what you're doing here, I feel is really, really strong. And you notice how much smoother the winds sound in here with these longer slurs. It just really sounds much more fluid, like the piano part does, right? Rather than right in here where you really have separated them all out. Da 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 da. Right? You know what I mean? Like that sort of feels sort of fussy right in here. What if we just to use this longer approach in more places, right? Because it seems to me like you just kind of haven't made up your mind. Here you want really long slurs. Here you want slurring on each beam group, and here you want to sort of go ta-ta, ta-ta, So just really think about that and stop doing this, right? Stop slurring across the downbeat when you don't need to, all right? Just this should be its own bow stroke. Ta-ta, right? Just like you have here in the clarinet, right? Just so much wiser. And then, but you're missing a tie here. I'm in the wrong thing, right? Okay. Alrighty. So, anyways, I know I got a little tough on you here, and I was expostulating, in other words, speaking very firmly and directly, but that doesn't mean that I think your score is, fatally flawed or anything like that. I think it's really great, in fact. I just found it really exciting. And the thing is, all you need to do is just make some of those little adjustments and rethink like dynamics and slurs and so on, and it would be a very, very strong playable score. Okay, so think about that. It just remains for me to thank you, Dragan, for showing me your score, bringing it to these evaluations, supporting on Patreon. It just is also helpful, and you're helping all these other composers get better with their craft, and you hopefully are getting better from my advice, and I hope that you'll understand that really, like, me being emphatic about this is just really trying to make you a better orchestrator, if that's possible, just to really give you everything that you need so that you have certain impulses and instincts that are, that aren't going in a direction that makes your score unplayable, right? And really, thanks so much to everybody who's watching this. And I know that some people are going to jump in with some comments too. And if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. There is room for more than one opinion in this world, right? And in this world of orchestration, just really would be interested to hear what other people have to say about this. And also, thank you so much for watching this far, and to all the other patrons supporting on Patreon. It really makes a huge difference. Hey, I just got so much energy and so much, such a positive feeling from going through this score. I hope you'll join me in looking at the next score, which I'll be releasing in just a few hours. See you then.